Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan, along with my fabulous co-host, Kathryn Peterson, and we'd like to welcome you back here in 2025 to another exciting episode where we've invited a friend who is a guest on today's podcast, and we cannot wait to introduce you to Scott Davis. But before we dive into the interview with Scott, let me remind all of you that we recently celebrated our 50th episode and had a lot of fun, not only recording that episode, but the feedback we've had since publishing it has been fun because it was an opportunity for us to really take a little look behind the scenes. So, Kathryn, as that playback came across your desk, any thoughts as you look back on 2024 and a year of recording podcasts together?
I feel so grateful and so proud. And that day I woke up and was like, oh my gosh, today's 50. I told my husband at like 5 in the morning when he was working out. And it's hard to believe that it went by so quickly. And I looked it up and I think it was like 9% of podcasts make it to 50. So we're in the top 10%. I'll take it.
Hey, it's nothing but up from here, my friend.
That's right. That's right.
Let's bring into the frame our friend Scott, and let me just set this up shortly, and then let's spend some time getting to know Scott because I've had the privilege of getting to spend time with Scott over the last 7-8 years in a small town in Oregon where the two of us call home, or if the state of Oregon is listening, let me edit that. My home is in Arizona, but I live in Lake Oswego a decent amount of the time. And as we've had a chance to spend time in that community, both professionally and personally, whether it's been work stuff or hanging out, I've really learned that this is one of the most interesting people that I have the privilege of knowing. And it seems like every time we get together, not only am I laughing a lot, I'm learning a lot. And my hope is I get to bring a little bit of both of those into today's podcast. So without further ado, let's welcome our friend. Hi, Scott. Good to see you today.
Yeah, hi guys. Michael, I love spending 5 months and 30 days with you here in Lake Oswego. So you can spend 6 months in a day and I appreciate it. And Kathryn, we've spent a little bit of time together over the years. So yeah, gosh, I'm honored and humbled to be sitting here with two giants.
Wow. Well, we're already off to a running start. Thank you for the validation. And Scott, my memory, we had some intersections through the Master's Coach program when we first met, and some opportunities, I think, through some common friendships. Guys like Patrick Palmer were in that mix. Sean McCluskey, other friends of ours who, we all knew some of our friends in common. Ken Perry comes to mind as well, another former guest on the podcast. But my memory when things really shifted was there was a day where I was getting ready to host a roundtable, and Kathryn, you might have even been coming to this event in Lake Oswego back in, I think it was 2017. And for some reason, I wanted to just look at some alternative venues. And Scott, I remember you saying, "Hey, I got an idea. What if we went to lunch out in the wine country?" And I showed you a spot that might be a good option for you. Do you remember this lunch that we had?
I do. We had soup.
We talked about
That's
wedding
how much
soup.
I remember it.
Well played. Red Hills Market, I believe, is where we
Yes. Yeah.
So okay. So just in case you thought I was forgetting anything, and what I remember about the time that we spent, I remember coming back and telling Lori is, wow. I mean, I spent the whole time thinking, how have I not gotten to know Scott sooner? This is a guy, like, we live in a parallel universe. We knew tons of people in common. We had lots of experiences in common. And then just that drive out and the drive back and the soup, of course, gave us a chance to unpack a lot of things, even about personal, family, kids, stuff. I really enjoyed discovering that we had so much in common, and I came back from that thinking, okay, I've got to realize, like, what a blessing it is to have a guy down the street that I enjoy spending time with. And from there, it just seemed like we have continued to find ways to do that. But I'd love to rewind the tape prior to that, because what I don't know are some of the stories of what led up to that special soup lunch. And so let's talk a little bit. You grew up in Northern California, down near the Bay Area, if I remember correctly. Do I have that right?
Yeah. In the Bay, in the East Bay, a little town called Moraga, which is very similar to Lake Oswego.
Excellent.
Actually eerily similar. But yeah, grew up in the East Bay, and my dad was in commercial lending, so grew up, yeah, with in the lending, uh, lending through osmosis for sure.
Yeah. So I have a friend who has that story. He calls himself an SOB, a son of a banker, and I understand that. What was Dad's business like? Was he entrepreneurial? Was he working in a group? What was that experience like for Dad?
Yeah, so he was with a gosh, let me make sure I want to make sure I explain this correctly. He was with a group, Mason McDuffie, which you all have heard, but this goes back to 70s, and he was with Mason McDuffie, and then gosh, I might butcher this a little bit, but Mason Mac kind of split up, and he and a group of people spun off and went to Mason McDuffie commercial lending. A group with Herb Tasker went off and did the residential piece, and there were different divisions. They were all separate, but kept the name. And yeah. So I had a couple summer jobs doing property inspections, but yeah, grew up in the lending space, and then went to college up at UOP in Stockton, University Pacific. And yeah, when I graduated, my roommate's mom managed a local office for Mission Hills Mortgage, and that's going to go back some years for some folks, but they're out of Tustin, California.
Okay.
And so there were, gosh, I worked with four of the fraternity brothers at the time for my buddy's mom, and kind of cut my teeth in lending in new subdivisions. So we would sit in the model homes on Saturdays and Sundays. And yeah, when I was coming out of school, I graduated in 1990. So it was kind of before the tech space. So most of us went either residential lending, commercial brokerage, or insurance, but more maybe commercial insurance. And then a few years later, it was more of the tech, people filled it out in the tech space. And, from then we've all dispersed a little bit, but
Yeah,
so I grew up with it. Yeah.
you've told me a lot about those relationships over the years, or they've come up in conversation. But before we leave Dad's influence, was there anything about being a kid in your home that made you think, "Wow, I see what Dad's doing, and that's inspiring"? Or was there anything there that you thought, "What a crazy business! Like, I don't understand how this thing works." Like, what did it feel like to be a child in a house with a dad who was hustling?
Oh. Um, Remember he worked a lot when I was younger, but I think it was different back then. I mean, all dads worked a lot. Um, but no, that's a good question. I've never really thought about that too much, but I did grow up, I would say, with real estate, just in general, maybe in the back of my mind, and even through my biz. I mean, I've done a lot in real estate outside of that. I still think, we may get this further, but I mean, what's Chris Rock say? Like, you might be rich, but I'm wealthy. So I feel, and I'm not wealthy, but I feel like real estate is still the best place to build wealth. So I did go. So I would say I grew up with finance. I grew up with real estate, and so it's been I would a natural progression.
So then, Scott, so you were talking about this group of really close people that you worked with. And I feel like that always gives us a really good basis as we continue those relationships. So how have you worked to continue those relationships since you guys all splintered off into all the different things that you're doing now?
Yeah, no, good question. So we were in our fraternity. I mean, we had a really close group of guys, and UOP was an interesting place because most of the students from UOP were either from Northern or Southern California. And so after school, we all kind of went back to Northern and Southern California. So we were all very, very tight. And when I was working for my buddy John, his mom, Chris, I worked for them for 4 years. And then another group of friends, Baldwins, which a lot of people listening will know, Mike and Fred Baldwin, and then brothers Scott and Rick. after then they had a wholesale channel of business, and so when I was done working for my buddy's mom in the retail side of Mission Hills, I moved over to a different where a bunch of other fraternity brothers we all worked together at for the Baldwin family. And back then, early on, it was Trillium Mortgage, and then through different iterations through First Franklin, it became Meritage, and then that's what brought me to Oregon. So there were a couple of different divisions, and Mike, still very close friend of mine, ran the Oregon division. Everyone else had since kind of moved up, and that's what brought me to Oregon. Again, working with and a bunch of other good friends, and friends, and all the wives are friends, and they're still here. And we still get together quite often, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I've
So
had a chance to meet a couple of those people. I remember, I think it was probably your 50th birthday was an opportunity
oh
to
yeah, yeah,
run
yeah.
into those folks. And you guys, to Catherine's question, you guys have really remained tight. I mean, some of
Yeah.
us keep up with our college relationships. I was just texting with one of my fraternity brothers yesterday, but I felt a higher sense of engagement that you guys had. It's like you guys a long time ago decided we're doing life together.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we have. And I guess being in this business, we've all kind of been through some I don't want to say ups and downs, but we've got some skin knees and some stub toes, and yeah, we've been to battle together. And one of my close friends, that part of this whole group, he's one of my wholesale reps right now, and yeah, no, yeah, we're still pretty tight, which is somewhat unique at my advanced age, but it's awesome. Yeah, yeah, and it's
Hey,
fun getting the kids together and the wives. Yeah.
be careful. I resemble that comment. Now, Catherine, I can tell you one thing, and I know that again, we both know Scott through some of our professional channels, but living in a town with him, I mean, I hope you're getting a little bit of the preview here of why I said to Lori early on, it's like getting to know the mayor of Lake Oswego. This guy knows everybody, or if he doesn't know him, he knows the person who knows them. Oh yeah, I know who that is. They're friends with so and so, or they went to school with so and so. He's and to the point of the California reference was it's not like he grew up in Oregon. He's just
Right.
this is how he operates. He's constantly connecting with people, and it's pretty fun to see in person. No question about it.
So Scott, one of the things I noticed about you that your superpower is you have this ability to make somebody feel really comfortable right away. Because
Oh,
when you and I and Michael went to dinner, I kind of knew you, but not very well. And I would say by the end of the dinner, I was like, oh, this guy's my friend. So even the middle, or even like 10 minutes in, I would say, I don't offer my leftovers to anybody. So I think I would call that a superpower. And I'm curious if you have some on purpose things that you do, or if that's just your personality, or how you kind of wrap somebody in so quickly. Because I feel like you either have these huge arms that you're able to grab somebody fast, or you just have this special ability of making people feel comfortable.
oh gosh, thank you. That's super nice. I mean, to start with, like you are like super easy to be with too. I mean, so that, I mean that's a definitely a two-way street. But kind of yeah. I mean, I would consider myself a connector, for sure. And I don't know. I'm. It's interesting. I'm probably better now, well, because I'm older. But I try to listen more and ask questions. And I think when I was a little younger, I was maybe talked too much. Although, if you might ask my wife, Carrie, and Michael knows Carrie, but she would say I'm not a good listener. But I think outside of outside of that, I'm a pretty good listener, and I yeah try to be interested and ask questions. So yeah, but there's probably some people that wouldn't say that about me. But that's okay. They're dead to me now, so I didn't. I'm kidding.
Right.
Oh, that's good. Captain, there's an old joke that's only funny because it's true. Sometimes I think I put up with Scott just so we can spend more time with Carrie. She's
Oh, for
certainly a
sure.
lovely gal. Scott, when I put that kind of the pieces of that puzzle together. You know, a guy who's grown up in this business, a guy who's a natural connector, and also let's, you know, again, I appreciate your humility, but you're pretty savvy with this business. You understand the mechanics of it because I think, from my perspective, you really see it from a real estate lens, and so I think you're able to see lending as a component of the larger real estate piece, which not everyone in lending does. Some of us get myopic and can't quite see the forest through the trees. You tend to look at the bigger picture. What do you think allows you to do that? Was there something about real estate as a larger topic that drew you at some point? Or did you just learn so much through the school of hard knocks that you talked about that at some point you said, I ought to be looking at this differently? Well, how did you get
Oh
there?
boy, I mean, I'm pretty good with numbers, so the math is not confusing to me. I mean, from a lot of people, you know, like they can't understand what APR is, but I know that APR, that's the average person's rate, and you can see that your rate is much lower. So it kind of helps take that objection off the table. No, so you know, so numbers come easy to me, and in the lending piece, that's, you know, 'cause sometimes we have to battle, and but I also understand the guidelines and the nature of the guidelines. And I think, and I don't know if it's unique to lending, but maybe lots of industries, but I think in lending, I'll just as an example, like some people are really good at the guidelines, but they're not really good in sales. And some people are, you know, maybe very good in sales, relationship building, but they're not good in the guidelines. And so for those people, they have to maybe, you know, build the team around them, or you know, focus on their strengths and, you know, build around the weaknesses. Not that I don't have lots of weaknesses, but I'm kind of good at both, I think. And and I, you know, I bought my first house at a young age, and so I understand the power and the velocity and the momentum of building wealth on the real estate side. And I like debt. I'm kidding, I don't like debt, but yeah, I just I don't know if I answered your question or I just kind of rambled there,
Well,
but
you may have created a second question though. I mean,
yeah,
even within the joke, I think there's some truth to explore there. I don't think you like debt, but I think you're smart about how you use it, and you've figured out not only how to do that personally, but it seems like you've helped a lot of other people along the way. Because a lot of what I see you attracting are not just folks that are using a mortgage to finance their primary residence. You help a lot of people who are doing generational purchases. Like, you're now helping people help their kids get into
yeah,
homes. You're helping people invest in real estate. And this is a little more than just, you know, buying the single family residence that someone's going to move into. And I think it's because you do understand how to talk to them in a way to where they can demystify some of that
yeah,
process.
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's you know, I guess part of what I try to present is, you know, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. You know, I own rentals, second homes, and you know, for some people, like, you know, the shoe cobbler shoe doesn't fit, right? I mean, you're going to take advice from somebody in the biggest financial transaction of your entire life, and you know, ideally, you want to work with someone that has gone through similar experiences or is savvy to understanding, you know, good debt, bad debt, good leverage, you know, what makes sense. And I do try to approach, and maybe this goes back to what, you know, what Kathryn was so nice enough to say, that I mean, I'm a relationship person, and so I do try to treat my clients like friends. I've become friends with lots of my clients, and I try to treat the transaction as if it was my own. That sometimes that backfires on me a little bit sometimes, because I'm pretty honest and candid, and maybe that's not what they want to hear. But I think at the end of the day, it's you know, good and solid advice, and also thinking about not just this transaction, but what this means down the line.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where most of the people that have really survived over the last few years or thrived over the last few years, most of those people I've seen really have a heart for their client and look at it as a long-term relationship. And those are the people that are still around like you. So, a question related to that. So, you always seem to have such a good attitude and you always seem to be positive. So, how do you keep yourself positive during maybe these couple years that have been a little interesting?
Well, this is not my first rodeo, and same with you guys either. So I've been through this before. When the market, so I'll answer it and then I'm going to go back a little bit, but I'm pretty good about, worrying about stuff I can control, and like I can't control rates. And so, today rates kind of got beat up a little bit, but okay. I mean, what am I going to do about that? I'm not going to wear it. So I'm pretty good about, again, worrying about things that I can and can't control. And hey, don't get me wrong, I make a mistake on something and now I'm worrying about something I did control. So there's that piece of it. I think, some maturity. I've been doing this, since 1990. And now there was a time, right earlier in my career where I would worry about, I would be stressed about things that, again, beyond my control. When the market, hit the skids, kind of starting in 95, 96, and it kind of carried throughout. I kind of touched on earlier, I was on the wholesale side, and the wholesale channel pretty much got wiped out for the most part. And so I was kind of left, I didn't pivot early enough. I kept the faith in the wholesale. I moved a couple of different companies. I kept going into business. And so back then, I did not handle it as well as maybe I would today. I would say that probably went, I went through, I used to call it, became indifferent on some stuff, but it was probably some situational depression because I'd lost my identity. Like I made a lot of money back then, and I was young and cocky and not as humble as I am today. No, but I lost my identity, and I had to, my dad used to tell me, you're not starting over, you're starting again. Well, I've had to start again a few different times, but that was a tough period for me. And Michael mentioned mutual friend Patrick. Well, Patrick was really threw me a big lifeline back in 2000, oh gosh, 8 or 9 maybe, when he was just opening up Pinnacle Wholesale, and he created a spot for me because I needed a place, I needed a job, I needed insurance, and so I've been grateful to Patrick. Back then we worked together for a number of years at a few different companies afterwards. So I think through life's lessons, through ups and downs, again, a few skinned knees and kicks in the shins, and a couple, maybe a foot higher than my shin a few times. I guess maybe I just handle a little bit better now. So
yeah, I want to explore one comment that you made, and you referenced that this isn't your first rodeo. First of all, I want to challenge that by saying I don't think you've ever been to any rodeos. I think you're more rodeo than you are rodeo, but that's just a personal impression. But what I'd love to know in all seriousness is if the version of you in 2025 could go back to that kid in 1995 and tell him what you couldn't have known then, but you know now, what advice would you give that kid, that
I'd
young
say
man?
buy Microsoft stock and don't ever sell it.
Okay, that's decent. How about in the real estate related advice? What would you tell him?
So I made the comment that I didn't pivot out of wholesale early enough. I guess you go back to 95. Yeah, about 95. I should have pivoted to just retail origination like I am now. And I didn't pivot early enough. I kind of kept the faith, and I just kind of kept getting beaten up along the way. And like I said, Patrick created some great opportunities for me. And I've had a lot of fancy titles along the way. And just with this market, and I know you guys have seen and felt it, but a lot of the middle management positions, aren't there like they used to be, and nor should they be. I mean, to be honest with you. And so had I moved to retail, 20 years ago, and maybe not quite 20, 17 years ago, I'd probably be in a better position than I am today. I mean, I really went back into full-time origination the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I feel like I'm playing catch up a little bit. So right. Like 3 years ago, right, rates were still at 3%, but kind of come spring and June about 22, right? Is when rates started kind of moving up. And I
That's
told
correct.
myself, And I told myself, I said, look, if the market starts making a move again, I'm going to pivot early. I'm not going to wait too long again. And so one of the, so that was a lesson learned. So that's why, for me, I pivoted from the mortgage banking world to the broker world, just because I kind of saw what was going on in the, between the two. And for me, that was just a better move, but I decided to pivot early. And, I've seen a lot of folks, pivot after me to that different channel. So, yeah.
Kathryn, when Scott was describing these events, I remember walking through those events with with you, with lots of my clients, but with Scott as well. And I have to tell you, one of the things that I was really impressed with is, he, like me, he's bilingual. He'll speak a little English and sarcasm, and we both float in and out of that from time to time. But the truth was, Scott hustled. I mean, he really made that pivot and hustled, which not a lot of guys our age either were willing to do, maybe even some weren't able to do mentally. It was just too hard to get
Mhm.
back into that
Mhm.
mindset. But I watched Scott figure it out quickly, and it was really impressive to see that. Look, a lot of this is back to what you and I talk about on our podcast. It gets back to mindset, and so what I would describe, Scott, and what I get to see from you is um, you embrace that growth mindset, that sense of, like you said, focus on what I can control, not on what I can't control. And Kathryn, we had an episode on this. I think somewhere in the middle is I call this exercise CIA: control, influence, and accept. And I see you doing all three of those. Yes, you do take ownership over the things you can control, but you influence a lot of things with your positivity. And then you accept things, like you said, hey, what am I going to do? Rates moved today. I just have to accept that's the market. That's not me. Kathryn, I realize that's a lot of setup, but that's it. Scott's such a great example of some of the things we try to
Mhm.
talk about regularly on our episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely feel that. And I think another thing just to bring up is people get this feeling of like, hey, I kind of think the market might be going here, or I think for my business, I might need to trust my gut on this thing. And I think so many times we don't. And it sounds like you learned that lesson once before. And this time you're like, you know what? I have to trust my gut. And I think that's hard for people to do all the time. And I think it takes that correct mindset to be able to trust your gut. So I would say you need to give yourself a little bit more credit for really doing that and then following through, because sometimes that can be the most scary. And so I would say, kind of another follow-up question on this is you don't seem like you're afraid of anything, which is great. And, that may not be the case, but I'm sure there are moments that you're like, holy cow. So is there anything you tell yourself to just kind of propel through that fear that you think would help our listeners?
Well, I know both Michael and I just went through our heads with, you're not afraid of anything. We both probably thought clowns, but that's,
That's fair.
Hey, you're not supposed to out my one fear. I shared that with you in privacy.
I'm writing this down in my notes.
totally. So sorry, what was the, what was the question? What am I afraid of? Like, any fear or?
No, how do you propel? I already know it's clowns. How do
Yeah.
you propel through the fear?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know. I guess I just try to do what I'm supposed to do. And I mean, I'm not gonna, I mean, yeah, I mean, I still, have, fears and, deal with that. I mean, I try not to make fear-based decisions though, but, sometimes with my clients, I will say to them, I said, look, having a little bit of fear is okay. I actually will say this to my clients. You're asking good questions, and so having a little bit of fear is okay. It means that you're being thoughtful in your decision making, and you're asking the right questions so you can make the right decision, which is better than having no fear and just being cavalier about
Mhm.
everything you do. So, but I mean, I would say that one of my I overthink stuff, and maybe I wouldn't say that's how I deal with fear, but I mean I do overthink stuff, and you see me, you might see a different version of me here than maybe some other times, but with my clients and like if you're getting all fired up on stuff or you're your clients and your referral partners are just going to see a reflection of how you're acting. So if you don't stay positive and you don't stay calm and you don't remain, focused, then your clients will follow you in that suit. And so I think that, maybe some people out there that struggle more than others, if you're not calm at work, then everything else is gonna be driven through that, which then makes your job more difficult.
Scott,
So
you're
how's
describing
that for
something.
an awesome non-answer? Gosh, I didn't answer that one very well.
You know, here's what I would tell you. It's evidence for those of us listening that this is authentic you. And I think that's what is attractive when you give an answer like that, is you're letting people see I'm processing what you're asking me and I don't have a canned answer for that. And I'm not going to BS my way through one. So it's a little bit like, Kathryn, in the state of Oregon, ducks get treated with either, a lot of love or a lot of hate because there's a mascot associated with them. But anytime we see the actual bird on the water, they look really calm, really graceful. You don't really see how hard they're paddling under the water. They're working really hard to maneuver their way around, but you look at their bodies and their heads and they just look all calm and cool. And Scott, you do have that ability. You do stay calm. You know, if Ty decides to listen to this, he'll probably be like, "What are you two doing talking my world?" But I picture you in the batter's box, and you're willing to take pitches. You're willing to say, "Okay, I don't have to swing at everything."
Yeah.
And by taking pitches, you work the count a little. And at some point you get to a place where okay, he's thrown everything at me he's got. Now I can just wait on the pitch I want to hit. And if he's not willing to throw it to me, I'll take the base on balls. That's what I get to see when I watch from the outside. So you're right. You may be letting us into some of the thought process that's not as smooth when it's in your head as it is outside, but I get to see what's on the outside. And you look like a guy who's very comfortable waiting on the pitch he wants to swing at.
Oh, I
The the
appreciate that. Yeah.
uh, the other thing I just want to throw at you really quick is a lot of times overthinkers think through the fear before they get there, so they don't even experience the fear. And that could have
Wow.
been why you had a hard time answering the question, is because you've already thought about it and practiced it in your head 22 times before you get to that moment. So the fear is gone at that point because you practiced it so many times. So that could
Yeah,
be
I
part of
mean,
it too.
it's maybe that just comes with maturity. I mean, being, again, taking a few body blows along the years. I was talking, so Aaron in my office, one of the owners of the company, and Aaron is a massive producer. And so I love talking to him and learning, from Aaron. And we had a conversation last week. What day is today? Friday? Yeah, last week. And we were talking about, and again, we like to talk about the mortgage industry and paint this broad brush, like, oh, it's only the mortgage industry. It's probably most industries have their different nuances, but just from the seats that we sit in, the trap that we fall in, and I think people that have been in this for a long time don't fall in this trap anymore. But the trap that we can fall in is that we take our clients' problems and make them our own, and that creates the stress and the fear. And it's like, look, you know, you win a contract today and rates are higher today than they were last week. Well, I can't wear that. Like, that's not my fault. Or you have a 620 credit score and this is what your rate is. That's not my fault. And it doesn't mean I'm not empathetic or sympathetic, or I'm not going to try to do my best to get you the best deal and help you the best that I can. But I think realtors, they fall in the same trap. Like, they take their clients' concerns and for some reason they make it their own. And I don't think that's a good way to do business. I don't think that's fair to us, and I don't think we can help them as best that we can if, again, we take their problems and like make them our own. That's unproductive.
There's a lot of emotional intelligence in that statement because you're right. If you're allowing their emotion to now dictate the temperature of this whole relationship that you're in the middle of, I mean, let's face it, money is what the number one stressor that people are going to feel,
Sure.
and you're managing the largest financial transaction they're ever going to experience until the next time they buy a house, and then it's only going to get higher. I mean, that's stress. And so if you join them in that stress and chaos, who's there to bring calm and focus and ultimately think clearly enough to make decisions and provide direction and, land the plane? I definitely can see all of that, Scott. Kathryn, as we tie this topic down, any other thoughts as it relates to questions that you believe our audience would love to hear from Scott?
Who are you watching, reading? You know, who are you emulating right now?
Oh gosh. Well, I just finished Squid Game, so that's what I've been watching.
I've been watching Beast Games, so or
Oh,
whatever. So
yeah.
it's equally trashy, I understand.
You know what? I used to read. I don't read as much as I used to, although I am reading. I'm reading a book right now by Viktor Frankl. Oh gosh,
Man's
that's
Search for
horrible.
Meaning.
Yes, yes. This really impactful book. What's it called again?
Yes, exactly.
But my
We'll
wife
put it
got
in the
that.
show notes.
I know. But I haven't really read a book in a while, but Carrie got that for me for the holidays, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through. So that's super interesting. You know what I haven't watched in a while, but I was watching, which I thought, like, I like to watch a lot of different things, and I watch a lot of junk food, right? But it's interesting how a lot of stuff maybe we watch really resonates to us as people or in our business, or you guys do the same thing. But you might go somewhere and you might see someone do something like, wow, that was a really kind of ninja sales move, or that, what they just did or said made me feel a certain way. So gosh, I should try to do that more. That's one thing I've learned actually. As I've gotten older, I'm not perfect at it, but right. It's, how you making somebody feel,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not, it's not what you say, but how you say it. I mean, no secret sauce there, and by the way, that's my quote. No one has ever said that before.
I'll make sure you get proper credit next time I say it.
Totally, totally. But I used to watch Chef's Table on Netflix. And if you watch Chef's Table, they interview world-class chefs. And I'm not a cook or chef. I like to eat. That's makes me hungry, and I watch that. But they would do these story, each episode is a different chef. But if you look at them, it's not unlike like our journey as salespeople, or regardless of your profession. But you got this this chef that's young, they got a lot of talent, and maybe they start off really strong, and they're kind of figuring who they are. And the story's all the same. Then something happens, something goes south. They almost have to hit rock bottom to understand who they are, understand their why, and through that, it gives them that creativity to then emerge from the bottom, and it just propels them to the next level. And I feel like that's kind of everyone's journey. We all, have our ups and downs, but sometimes it takes, having those dips to understand like who you are, and, talk about your whys and all that stuff, to then, figure out, your motivation and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And all that, I think, builds into that client experience. It doesn't matter whether you're selling mortgages or, selling cars or selling insurance or, whatever. I was
Or
going to try to think of
cooking a
some other
great meal at the chef's table.
Yeah, I was trying to think of some other smart ass comment to make about that, but I think you guys get it. Yeah.
Scott, that's a excellent place to pull that together, because you're right. What you just said is all of us are on some version of that journey, and we have to figure out in that moment of adversity what we're going to choose. Are we going to, choose to hide and shrivel, or are we going to embrace that creativity, that opportunity, and try something new? And I think some of the great stories we all love are those comeback stories. That's why Rocky was such a great movie, and that's why
Yeah.
the example you just gave resonates with our audience. And look, that goes back to your story. I mean, you said, look, I think however you phrased it, I've been rich, I've been poor, but rich is totally better. I think the reality of your comebacks is impressive, because you
Um,
really never let yourself be defined by a moment, high or low. All joking aside, you seem to have a good sense of throw out the highs, throw out the lows, and keep moving forward.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think a lot of that comes with, yeah, again, maturity. In what year is this? 2007 or eight. We sold our house. And it was at a time where you sold your house because you kind of had to, and the market was kind of taking a dip. And when I needed to, I had a lot of equity, but I needed to scale back. And when I was going to list the property, I told the listing agent, said, look, I don't want to have a sign in my front yard, because people that are selling now, they're selling for a reason. and I don't want my neighbors or people talking. And I remember my dad said to me, he goes, put a sign in your yard. Your neighbors and friends, they got enough of their own problems. They're not going to care about you. And that kind of always stuck with me too, because again, maybe it helps with the highs and lows, but people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's helpful to not lose sight of.
Well, Scott,
So,
I'm glad we thought of you today because you've shared
oh
some
gosh,
real gems with us.
you guys are awesome. I mean, can we do this once a week? You guys say such nice things about me. This is great.
We'll do our best.
I'm really a great person now.
Well, we'll make sure Carrie gets a link to the episode. She can hear all about it.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Kathryn, that's going to put on a wrap on today's episode. It was our pleasure to interview Scott Davis, and I'm so thankful to our audience for tuning in each Wednesday as we drop new episodes of Building Bigger Lives. We hope as you follow along, whether on Apple or on Spotify, or you follow us on video on YouTube, that you would continue to share episodes that were meaningful to you, including today's. The stories that Scott shared resonated with our audience, and I hope someone in our audience will share them with someone else that needs to hear them. Thanks for tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing you on an episode very soon.